Good morning and welcome to Zen Fits here in Blackstone, Virginia, the center of the world. But then you too are at the center of the world. And here it is Sunday morning. Is it too early for a sermon? Is it too early for church? I just realized, the title of this talk is The Iron Curtain of Language. Before I forget what the title is and go rambling on, I just wanted to say, back in 1970, I had a heartfelt calling to be a minister, and I went to finally got. I just had a big samadhi. I just had a big awakening, and I thought I was going to, I was a son of God, or anyway, so I was going to go be a minister, and so anyway, the seminary didn't accept me, kicked me out. So anyway, that's beside the point. The topic of here is the Iron Curtain of Language. It's important. I used to teach. I went to Old Dominion and got a degree in English so I could teach English. So I only lasted 3 years. I taught English in Northern Virginia, and in the third year I had this samadhi or this awakening, and suddenly I was Krishnamurti, and so I threw the textbook out dramatically. I went into classroom. I was teaching 11th grade, and I went into classroom and I took the textbook, and I threw it in the trash. That was a big thing in the 60s, when you threw the textbook in the trash. I did it. Then I started teaching. I started cloning Krishnamurti, and I never went back. I was never able to teach again because every time I got in front of students, I got to front of the class. I threw the textbook in the trash, just like I'm doing now, throwing the textbook in the trash. So what textbook am I throwing in the trash? The textbook of grammar. I don't know about you, but when I was in school, English class, grammar was a big thing. It was so big I married an English teacher, but that's beside the point. But we spent a lot of time diagramming sentences and learning the parts of speech and the three persons, first person, second person, third person, and everything that you said, everything that was spoken was in one of these persons. So the first person is speaking from I. It's the first person. It's like poetry in prose. The second person is you, and the third person is person, place, or thing, it. So third person is awareness of something. It's a person, place, or thing. I'm aware of thinking. I'm aware of a feeling. And if I write about it, I'm aware of it. So I'm writing about everything. It's like it is the fill in the blank for reality. Reality is some form of it. But we never really know what it is. We just fill in the blank. Well, I'm talking about a dog. Did you see the tree? That's an it. In other words, the it gets filled in with a name and a form. And that's the way the language works. Subject, verb, object. Subject, I, verb does something to it. And it can be either external or internal. But in other words, this third person grammar is the scientific method that was born in the 16th century. So the scientific method requires that the scientist is looking at the world as it. It's a viewpoint. It's a viewpoint from being out of a mechanic or a surgeon. The surgeon cannot operate on the body if it's his own body. So it has to be it. It has to be separate from it. The mechanic can't fix the car if he's the car. The car, the machine, has to be it, you see. And then it, or machines, are made up of parts. So the third person viewpoint, and it's a viewpoint, is about reducing everything to smaller and smaller parts in it so you can fix them. Go to a doctor, you're in it, and he's going to look at your body as a machine. He's going to find a part that's not working and fix it. Or the computer. And it's logical. That was what the creation of the scientific method in the 16th century was, that this it world is logical. It's governed by rational laws that can be discovered, and they work everywhere. They work here on Earth, and they work at the end of the galaxy. That's why you can shoot a rocket out there, because the laws work out there that work here. So this is a viewpoint. But what happened was, it was so successful, third-person grammar, was that it became the dominant viewpoint. And you and I look at the world as it. And we just assume this is the way the world is. We just assume this is the only viewpoint. And we can use the first person in literature. For a poet is writing in the first person. Or you can write a novel in the first person where the viewpoint is you, not out there, you see. The author, if the viewpoint is third person, well, then the author is missing. It's all about it. But the viewpoint can change in language, in art, you know. But we're talking about in reality. So what's the first person viewpoint in reality? As a way of being aware, a way of knowing. If the only way of knowing in the modern world, in the Western world primarily, because that's where it began, in India, Eastern world and Eastern tradition, it was a different viewpoint, but let's not get into that. But the viewpoint in the West is always, since the scientific method, which has been the success of the Western world, is it. Remember Avatar? Avatar, the earth people or sky people saw the world as it. And the Navi saw the world as thou. Now Martin Buber got into this. He was one of the first philosophers to really understand and work out the diagram of language, of awareness. And he said that the third person is I-it consciousness, which is our dominant consciousness. And that the I-thou consciousness was that of identity. So you get I-it consciousness is a consciousness of relationship. Here's like I am in relationship and looking at it. And so it is fill in the blank here. Oh, there are 4 its here. And I can name them, you see. But the thumb out here, you see, is not being counted. The thumb will count 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 4 its, and I can name them, and I can dissect them and talk about each one. Oh, the fingernail's longer here. That's a fingernail. This is what good is this finger? And I can analyze. I could get a PhD on these 4 fingers. But the thumb is never in the study. You see, the thumb is out here. The thumb is out here. So the counter is missing in the I-it grammar, in the third person grammar. The counter is missing. The counter is a ghost. This is why the famous phrase, the ghost in the machine. And in the modern world, we're all ghosts in the machine. We're not in the machine, where everything's in it, you see. Everything's in it. Now, Buddhism and other traditions of non-duality, but we're talking about Buddhism, and when I talk about Buddha, I talk about Zen, because that is the one that really breaks through the third person trance into the first person. So all the Zen koans are really about first person and third person viewpoints. So when you have a monk, the Zen koans are little dramas, the little plays, the little mini dramas, an encounter of the third kind. Remember that movie? That's good. Encounter of the third kind. See? So the first encounter is I-it. Second encounter is I, thou. But the metaphor, or say a Zen koan, little drama, is an encounter of the third kind. I'm just making this up. So when you get into Zen, you're getting into the demonstration, not the description, which is third person. If you describe anything, you're describing it. First person is not describing anything. First person is being it, is identity. So when Buddha awoke, hang in here, when Buddha awoke from his awakening, he exclaimed, I alone am the honored one. I alone am the honored one. What he was exclaiming, with the lion's roar, I am the first person. Now, if you say I'm the first person, but you look at it with an I-it thing, well, that's stupid. What do you mean? He's the first person. What are the other persons? There are other its. Well, he's not talking in an I-it language. he's aware in a first person language. Where can I go that I am not? You yourself, where can you go that your experience is not? You can imagine experiences anywhere. You can watch a movie about experiences somewhere, but it's all you. It's all your experience. You're the first person. But we're just culturally conditioned to look at everything as an it. So I look at experience as an it. But you are the experience. The I-it language that we're just enculturated into without questioning separates me from my own experience. Say, I'm having anxiety. Well, anxiety isn't it, then who am I? See, I'm separate from I'm having anxiety. Well, who is I? You see, the language separates us. So we have to really discover a language that will collapse the I-it into an I-thou. Now, I-thou is awareness as. The sunlight is doing tricks here. You see what I mean? Awareness as is identity with. You are what you are aware of. There's no gap. That's the first person. There's only one person. But as soon as you use the language of third person, that separates into it and I and it. But I is not in the map. I isn't counted. In first person, there's nobody there to count. You're it. And we flip-flop back and forth between these two. Now, in Zen Buddhism, the I-thou is called samadhi. It's an experience where you are the experience. There's nobody there doing it. Like jogger's high. I talked about this the other day. A jogger's high is a low-level samadhi. And so the talk yesterday was on the chariots of fire. And that scene of them running on the beach, they're in samadhi. The jogger's high. It could be a walker's high. It could be a tennis high. It could be a sports high. It could be a warrior's high of being in a battle. Usually people, whenever you become what you're doing, a knitting high. Anytime you get lost in what you're doing, so you're not there doing it, and suddenly you are what you're doing. You see, that's not an I-it language. I-it language is I'm doing this. Subject, verb, object. In first person, there's no subject, verb, object. The subject is the object. The object is the subject. Boom. Boom, you see. And that's freedom. So we only get brief moments of this when we live in an I-it world, when we live in a person, everything's in it world, when we live, we only get brief moments. We think it's a miracle. Oh, thank you, Jesus. We can't believe it. But it happens all the time. We just we don't have the right framework to understand it, because it's kind of like clearing a little bit of clarity in a pond full of algae. The algae is I-it. And the little pond, the little bit of clarity where it reflects you, you see, is I, thou, or awareness as. But as soon as that happens, the karma or the habit or the inertia of the I, it world comes rushing back in and says, oh, what was that? What was it? What was it, you see? As soon as we ask, what is it? What is it? We're in third person. I'm not in it, you see. So in Zen, okay, well, the question is it. You know, who, non-dualists on social media always say, well, who is talking? Well, who is walking? Well, you know, so we're constantly playing around this, but we're playing around it in words. Anyway, this is my Sunday talk, so thanks for dropping in. This is the Iron Curtain of language. The Iron Curtain of language is the grammar. So if we want to penetrate the iron language, we have to penetrate the way we use language, the way we use words, and the trance of words, and the trance of grammar. So waking up is breaking out of the trance. That's all. Thanks for dropping in. See you next time.